Hey y'all, my name is Dustin, and today I'll go through the basics of how tech is researched in Victoria 3 and point out a few areas of each tech tree you can focus on depending on your goals. I won't be talking about what is meta or technically the most optimal. Instead, I'll go over how research works, groups of techs you can focus on, as well as a few key techs that are important no matter your playstyle. If you find the video helpful, I always appreciate a like or subscription. Let's get into it. You research technology two different ways in Victoria 3. The first is through weekly innovation that you put into whichever technology you've selected to research. The second is through technology spread, which occurs if there are technologies other countries have researched that you have not yet researched. Which technology tech spread will be researching is random, although it will always be in the lowest tier of technology, and it is happening to one tech in each tech category at the same time, as long as there are technologies that someone else has researched ahead of you on. Weekly innovation only goes to a single technology that you choose, although you can queue up multiple to be researched sequentially. The amount of technology spread you get each month is slightly randomized between an upper and lower limit, but can be raised. Both innovation and tech spread can be increased by building universities, and both are affected by your literacy. The maximum amount of innovation you can generate is capped based on your literacy. It has a base value of 50, and you can increase by an additional 150 if you are at 100% literacy, scaling down to an additional 0 at no literacy. Or to look at it another way, you can gain 1.5 innovation cap for every 1% literacy. You can see your current maximum innovation in the tooltip. You need to build universities to actually utilize it. As Prussia, our innovation can be raised 69.3 above the base of 50. Prussia starts with the second production method for universities already unlocked, which means we need 47 universities to generate the maximum innovation. Building universities past this would not generate more innovation. However, going over the maximum innovation cap will add to your technology spread. It is at a much lower efficiency, with 1/5 of the innovation over your cap becoming technology spread. In the late game, it can still be worth it to overbuild universities to catch up on tech if you're behind. Literacy also directly affects technology spread by adding to it regardless of whether you have universities. Up to 75 extra technology spread at 100% literacy, or again to look at it another way, 0.75 spread for each 1% literacy. I want to reiterate that universities do not directly add to tech spread until you have passed the maximum innovation cap, at which point innovation spills over at a rate of 20% into tech spread. This means that in the late game, when you have too much money and overbuild your universities, you can research something specific you want ahead past the current tech tier you're on, even though there is a large penalty, and then just rely on technology spread to fill out the rest as other countries research it. A quick note on literacy before we move on. Literacy is only calculated based on integrated states, ignoring your unintegrated territories and colonies. Keeping with the Prussia example, if we go into our population statistics and click on our largest group of peasants, we can hover over their literacy to see what is affecting it. Your literacy trends towards your pop's education access. At the beginning of the game, this is mostly based on their wealth. By default, pops get 0.5 education access per wealth level, but this is increased by some technologies, and then education access is massively affected by the education institution. You can also temporarily increase education access, and by extension literacy, by using the Promote Social Mobility decree on populous states. It is also important to note that universities do not directly raise education access or literacy. What they do, other than generate innovation for researching, is increase qualifications for pops in the states they are built. Normally, qualifications don't matter and you don't have to pay attention to them. Your peasants will easily promote into laborers and laborers into machinists and so on, fairly quickly filling up new buildings. However, if you start with a really low literacy, or if you start with serfdom, which massively lowers qualifications, you can run into situations where pop promotion is really slow and your buildings are not able to hire very well. If this happens, universities can help a lot to get pops promoted and hired into higher tier jobs. They can also be useful for this in states with a lot of discriminated against pops, as low acceptance status gives qualification penalties as well. Now let's look through the tech trees. The first thing to mention is that there is a penalty to researching tech in tiers that you have not yet completed. Technologies are separated into 5 tiers, which you can see by the background of the tech page as well as the Roman numeral under the tech icons. There's a penalty for the next tier until you have researched all techs of the previous tier. You can see the current penalty in the tooltip for tech when you go to research it. This is only within a tech category, by the way. So for example, you need all tier 1 military techs researched to not get a penalty researching tier 2 military techs. Alright, I'll start the tech overview with the production tree. The most important tech in the game is probably railways. There are only a few ways to increase infrastructure in a state, and infrastructure is very important for industrializing. The current infrastructure can be seen on the state overview, or you can easily see infrastructure balance in all states by opening the production lens and going to build a building. Each building you build has an infrastructure cost, and when you go over a state's infrastructure, it starts losing market access. This will increasingly cause local prices to increase, production to decrease, standard of living to drop. It can get quite out of hand if you don't pay attention to it. You can increase infrastructure by building ports or railways. Ports are of course only available in coastal states, give less infrastructure than railways, and will become expensive to subsidize if you don't have enough merchant marine consumption on your market for them to make a profit. In most cases, you will want to prioritize acquiring railway fairly early on in the game. You can also temporarily increase infrastructure in populous states with the road maintenance decree, and there are a few society techs on the left side of the tree such as modern sewage that give a small bonus. In the same area as railways tech, atmospheric engine is another important milestone tech. When you unlock this is when I suggest you begin switching to iron construction sectors. The production method given by atmospheric engine doubles the output of mines, making it much easier and cheaper to build up iron and coal mines. Water tube boiler just after it unlocks the production method for triple the base production of mines and is also very good. Switching to steel construction is more difficult and generally requires building up a lot of steel industry first, so getting Bessemer process and open hearth process to increase steel output doesn't really mean you should switch to steel construction as soon as it's available. I'd say these two are lower priority and might be researched by technology spread by the time they are most useful. And remember that you don't have to upgrade to a new construction type in all sectors at the same time. You can do it per state instead as you build up the input good. Now that we have the most important production techs out of the way, what else you want to focus on really depends on your economy. Most countries start with most of the tier 1 techs already researched. If you happen to play a country that starts with almost no tech, I'd recommend going for prospecting if you have a chance for gold to spawn, which you can see a map of on the Victoria 3 wiki, steelworking for the better tool and wood production methods, or lathe for the better clothing, furniture, and glass production. Wood is typically a great early industry to build up, so I'd lean towards steelworking, but every country's situation is different. The left side of the production tree is agriculture-focused techs, with a better production line and a lower employment line for when you need to free up population to work elsewhere. The middle of the tech tree is mining and heavy industry techs, down into electricity in the late game. Oil tech is also nestled in the bottom left here with arc welding, which is the final construction sector tech. The right side of the production tree is where the light factory techs are at. Food industry, clothing, furniture, paper, glass. I want to point out that rubber and synthetic dye techs are also on the right side. If you have access to rubber, which is most states in the game along the equator, you might want to get rubber and vulcanization as two of your first tier 3 techs. This unlocks the best production method for tool factories. The last thing I want to note in production is the group of techs starting with conveyors and pasteurization. These 4 techs just lower employment, so you can avoid researching them unless you are running out of peasants or immigrants to work. If you aren't already aware, the green production method icons on technologies are labor-saving methods. The purple ones are secondary methods such as luxury clothing and clothing factories, and the tan ones are primary production methods to improve the main good output of a building. There is a case to be made that the labor-reducing production methods are useful even if you have plenty of pops though. They lower the amount of labor jobs in your economy, which you may want to do for interest groups or standard of living reasons. Sometimes it is also necessary to use the transportation and electricity ones so that railways and power plants actually make a profit. Now on to the military tree. The only part of the military tree that is civilian relevant is the far left. This is where shipyards, trade center, port, fishing wharf, and whaling buildings get upgrades. If you want to set up or already start with a lot of trade centers, then hydraulic cranes might be something you want to research early on for the trade center production method. The rest of the ship side of the tech tree is pretty simple, with most techs unlocking one new ship unit type. Of particular note here is the landing craft tech that gets rid of the 25% offense penalty armies get when naval invading. The army side is a mix of military industry building upgrades, new unit types, and new army mobilization options. Arms, artillery, and ammunition industry is not among the most profitable buildings in the game generally, so I recommend building them for your own market instead of for export if you are focused on growing your economy. Although it can be fun to monopolize the world's military industries and cause supply shortages in other countries. Most countries start with line infantry, and a few of the Western European great powers start with skirmish infantry. Most of the mid-game armies will be primarily skirmish infantry, which have a higher defense than any unit before them has offense. This means that for major mid-game wars, you will want to research shrapnel artillery. In a military-heavy game, you might want to focus on reaching shrapnel artillery over the mid-game production and society techs. Triage and nursing are important to counter the kill rate that shrapnel artillery has when your opponents start adding it to their armies as well. As countries research through tier 4, armies move back in favor of defense values with trenches and machine guns, and then tier 5 techs add large amounts of offense. Finally, we have the society tree. The society tree is the most complicated of the 3 tech trees, and there is a lot you can focus on depending on your priorities. The most important early tech in society that you may not start with is stock exchange. This is because market access price impact has a large effect on pop's standard of living and the productivity of your factories that are not vertically integrated with their inputs. Low market access price impact makes the local price of goods in each state much more expensive relative to your country's market price in states where the goods being bought are not produced locally. For example, Prussia starts with stock exchange researched already, and if I open up Silesia, which doesn't produce any fish, we can see that fish is about 10% more expensive here than at our market price, due to us having 85% price impact. The default is 75%. If I now open up Warsaw, which also doesn't produce fish, the local price is over 30% higher than the country market price. We can see that this is because Russia doesn't have Warsaw incorporated, and they also have traditionalism, bringing price impact down to 60%. The left side of the society tree is where you unlock iron frame construction and urban planning, and then steel frame construction down here in tier 3. You could prioritize steel frame if you already have a large steel industry when you get to tier 3, but this isn't always the case. Zeppelins also give another 5% market access price impact later in the game. Paved roads is a pretty unique late game tech because it provides a potential alternative to spamming railway if you have rich pops and a lot of automotive production. This can free up pops working in some of the railways you have to do other things. Companies are very good in the current version of Victoria due to their large throughput bonuses, and so are something you might want to prioritize. There are also a lot of unique companies in the current version of the game that are fun to build up, especially if you have the Charters of Commerce DLC for their prestige goods. This whole line after stock exchange adds max company capacity. Mutual funds adds an important land reform law in commercialized agriculture that lets you shape your country's politics. Most countries start on tenant farmers, which boost the landowners through a political strength bonus, combined with aristocrats owning most agriculture buildings. You have the option to switch to homesteading pretty early on, but this massively boosts the farmers and rural folk, who don't always support laws you may want. Mutual funds unlocks commercialized agriculture as an option, which boosts industrialists through financial districts buying more agriculture buildings, as well as boosting the petite bourgeoisie and the trade unions. If you are struggling with keeping bureaucracy positive, you'll want to prioritize centralization and central archives. It isn't really worth it to build government admin only to increase tax revenue, but that is a nice side effect when you need to increase bureaucracy. Your income can very quickly spiral downwards if you go into negative bureaucracy, so make sure you have built up admin buildings or have researched a better production method before making big changes to institutions. If you want to colonize pieces of Africa, which is primarily to acquire rubber and other raw resources to feed into your economy, you need to prioritize getting quinine and then malaria prevention once you get to their respective technology tiers. You open up the production lens, you can see which states have malaria and which have severe malaria. Without quinine, colonies with the malaria modifier will make extremely slow progress. The same for the malaria prevention tech and the severe malaria modifier. The first nations to research each of these technologies will fairly quickly colonize and control most of Africa. Most of the other technologies in the center of the society tree are ideology, agitator, and law related. Egalitarian and everything that branches off of it adds new political parties, ideologies, and laws. Egalitarian in particular adds proportional taxation, which is when you can start taxing capitalists more and is important as your economy becomes industrialized. If you want to guide your nation in a specific roleplay direction, you'll want to look through this area of the tree. Of this group, I want to point out feminism as an important technology for most playthroughs. When you are eventually running out of workforce, the laws unlocked by feminism are how you raise your workforce ratio. By default, only 25% of your population works, but women's suffrage can bring this up to 40%. The right side of the society tech tree is important for university upgrades, education, and healthcare. Universities, of course, increase research speed by generating innovation. Although typically you should not mass produce them until you have a better production method than the default and you already have some industry built up. This is because they cost 400 to construct while only giving one innovation on the starting production method. You would have to sacrifice a lot of potential industry buildings you could have built to build up innovation early on instead, and it is normally not worth it. Dialectics gives the second production method, at which point you can consider whether to spend construction and budget on universities at the expense of economic buildings you would otherwise be building. The final university method isn't unlocked until the very end of the society tree in the bottom right. The health system institution is important to raise pop growth in your country. If this is something you want to focus on, consider prioritizing the medical degrees and pharmaceuticals techs, which will allow you to get up to level 4 health system investment with private or public health insurance. The final level isn't available until you get antibiotics way down at the end of the tech tree. The education institution is how you primarily raise literacy in your country. The education-related technologies also give an increase in education access based on wealth, even without the education institution active. Academia and empiricism enable you to get to level 3 education investment. For the last two levels, you need the children's rights laws unlocked by labor movement and human rights. To wrap it up, I'll mention the society techs I would go for when playing a country that starts with almost no technology. International trade is important to enable switching off of the isolationism trade policy, which is essentially mandatory if you don't have every raw resource available to you. Romanticism can be important to enable getting off of the traditionalism economic system, as it can be easier to switch to agrarianism than to interventionism. There is only one technology locked to specific country tags, which is sericulture, and it boosts silk production. It is given to 8 countries at game start and is basically flavored to give these countries better silk throughput. That's everything I have to say about technology. I hope it was helpful to some of y'all that are less experienced with Victoria 3. If you found the video useful, consider leaving a like and subscribing to see future videos. If you have any requests for videos on Paradox games, leave a comment and I'll add some of them to my list of projects. Thanks for watching, see y'all next time.